What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. In this video series, we're creating a React and Django authentication system. So this is the second part of a 3-part series. If you haven't seen the first part, you're going to want to check that out on my channel. Just to show you what we've built so far, you can see we've got 2 APIs here, one to log in a user and one to get some notes from a user, right, if they're logged in. So if I call the login, you're going to see I'm going to get 2 tokens here. So an access token and a refresh token using some credentials we made in the first part. And if I grab that access key and then pass it into my authorization header, you see I get the notes for that user, okay? So in this part, what we're going to do is we're going to make our authentication much more secure by using cookies instead. So we're going to pass our tokens through cookies, and then we're also going to add registration API and a logout API, right? So to get started, basically, what we're doing is we're calling these 2 default classes, right, from simple JWT. We're calling these 2 classes, and we want to customize these so that we can add our own variation, so we can put them in cookies instead of just sending them to the front end. So if you look at the documentation here, you can basically make this as a parent class, and we can create our own class taking in this like standard class that they give us, right? So if I go to URLs and then I take what we import here, as we're passing in what we've already used. If you go to views, we're going to want to import these, and then create our new custom class, right? So custom, and we're using this, so custom token obtain pair view. And then we're going to take in this class as we're customizing it. What we want to do is create a post request. Just going to take in self, like any Python function, and then request. We're going to take in arguments, we're going to take in keyword arguments. Now what we want to do is actually call this function, as if you remember from the first part, when we call this function, like we're calling here, we're basically getting these 2 tokens to return to us, and we want to grab these, right? So if we actually just call this, we can do that by doing, put it in a response variable. We're going to do super, which is grabbing this class, and we're going to call the post method, and we'll just pass in these arguments, okay? And then keyword arguments. So that's going to call this. So what will be returned will be the tokens we got. So in the response.data. So in the data we're getting them 2 tokens. So we can create an access token, which is going to be from the key access. And then we can create a refresh token as well. Is going to be taken from tokens refresh. Okay, now what we want to do is create a response, as every API needs a response. So create res equals response. So we'll just leave this empty, and then we'll add some data to it. So the data is going to be equal to success, and the success is going to be true. But if we have this, we also need to say what happens if it fails, okay? So we'll put it in a try except. So basically, if it works, it's going to run this code. If it doesn't, it's going to run this. So if it doesn't, it's going to return a response with an unsuccess. So it's going to return false in the success, right? So if this is working, what we want to do is we want to create our 2 cookies, and the way we do that is the response.setCookie. Then we need to pass in our arguments to create our cookie, right? So our cookie is going to have a key called access token, and the value of this access token is going to be the access token we just grabbed. And then we want this cookie to be HTTP only, as it's more secure. And then to add more security, we want this to be secure. So this just means that it's only passing through HTTPS, but it also run on your local host as well. So it'll be fine for development. And then we're going to do same site is equal to none. And then we're going to put path is equal to just a root here. And then we want to create another cookie for our refresh token, okay? And then we'll pass in our refresh token. And then we just want to return our response. So our response contains some data, which says we had a successful login, and then it's going to add these 2 cookies, all right? And we're returning that. So now we want to actually call this instead of what we were calling before, as we were calling just the standard class that we're given. So if we import what we just created, so custom token obtain pair view, and just replace what we were using before with what we just created. Oh, not like that, like that. And then as we're not using that anymore, we just get rid of that. So now we can test this in our Postman, and it's not going to return these anymore. So we got a successful login, and you can see we've got 2 cookies here that are being used. Okay, our access token, our refresh token. So what will happen if, because we don't want to use this anymore, we're not passing the token through an authorization header, we want to pass it through cookies. So if we just get rid of this, what will happen now is that we haven't got any authentication credentials provided. So we actually need to provide these when we're calling a function, right? And the way we're going to do this is actually using something in our documentation. So if you go over to your package, so your REST Framework simple JWT package, we're going to be using this class here, okay? So let's copy this. And we want to create this in a new file called authentication.py. Okay. And then we'll just paste that. So from, we want to import JWT authentication, okay? And you can see that this class has a function called authenticate, and that's what we're going to do. So every time we call a function, we're going to call this, okay? So we'll create a new class called cookies JWT authentication, and then it's going to take this as a parent class, and then what we want to do is call the function authenticate. Don't want that. Okay, let's get rid of these 2. So we've got this function authenticate, which is a subclass of that, a sub function of that. And then we want to grab our access token from our cookies. .get. It's the access token we just created. Remember, we created it here. So it's called access token. And then if the access token doesn't exist, we want to just return none, so it shouldn't be authenticated. And then we want to validate our access token. So we can use a function that's provided by the JWT authentication class. So get see validate token, and then we'll pass in our access token. So if this all works, we're going to grab a user, of our token, but if it doesn't, it's going to return nothing, okay? And then what we want to return if it did work is a tuple with user and validate token. As if you look at the documentation, this is what it should return, okay? So you can see it should return it here. So we should get a user and a token. So what we need to do now is actually call this. So let me just have a look here. So if we go over to our settings.py file, you want to look in your REST framework. At the moment, we're just calling JWT authentication. We want to actually call our cookies authentication class that we create here. So we're going to go into base, as it's in base, and then authentication, as it's in this file here, and then we called it cookies JWT authentication, okay? Basically, it's going to use this to authenticate instead of just looking at the access token we passed in the header, okay? So that should actually work now. So if we log in again, it's going to give us a new access token. If we log in now, you can see we get our ID for our notes for that user, okay? So what I want to do now is we've created our access token, right? Now what I want to do is actually create a custom refresh token. So scroll down here, I'm going to do custom refresh token. And what it's going to do is it's going to take in our refresh token. Let's add view at the end here. We can do a very similar thing to what we did before. So we want to do a post request. Let's take in self request. It's going to take in arguments. It's going to take in some keyword arguments as well. Then we want to call this, right? So actually, before we call this, so let's just put in a try accept straight away. And then we'll return response. Okay. So in here, what we want to do before we actually call this, we want to grab our previous refresh token. Okay. So the refresh token we have now is from our request dot cookies, just like we grabbed our access token before. Dot get refresh token. Okay. And then we're gonna set our request data, our refresh token, to this token we have now. Okay. And then we're gonna then call the token refresh view here. Okay. So super dot post. We could just pass in these. Okay. Now what it's going to do is we've used our old refresh token to show that it's still valid. It's going to get us a new access token, right? So we're going to call this and it's going to give us a new access token. So just like before, it's giving us tokens equals response dot data, and then our access token is tokens access token. Not access token, just access. And then what we want to do is create a new response. Set our data so that refreshed is true, so it's all worked. That means we're going to have to return refreshed as false if it didn't work. Sorry about that. And then we want to set our new cookie, so just like we did before. So response, and then our key name is going to be access token. Our value is going to be the access token. And then it should be HTTP only, should be secure. Same site as none. And then our path is going to be, okay. And now if we go to our URLs and then change this for our custom refresh, now we can get rid of this entirely. Now what I want to do, so I'm going to log in. I'm going to create a new request. So we'll do token is at token refresh. It's not a get request, it's a post request. What's the error there? We'd actually return a response, so we didn't actually return a response here. So we need to return res. Now that should work. So if I log in, then get this refresh token, and you can see it actually is refreshed. It's going to pass them that access token to be the new cookie token. Okay. So with the new tokens customized, what I want to do now is create a logout function. So if I do @API view, it's going to be post request. Do def logout. It's going to take in a request. Okay, so I'm going to put in a try and accept. So if it works, we're going to create a response. We're going to set success equal to true, as it successfully happened since it's in the try. And now we want to do response.delete cookie, and then we're just going to grab the cookie. So we're going to delete the access token, which had a path with the root, and then the same site is equal to none. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, just copy and paste that for our refresh token as well. And that should delete the 2 cookies, right? And then we'll return a response. And then if that didn't work, then we return response. Success was false. Okay, and now we can actually call this. So if I go into Postman again, create a new request, and we'll call it Logout. What we need to actually do is call this function. So we'll do path Logout, and it's gonna call our new function. So if we go to Postman again, then we're going to do API logout. So if we're logged in, we log out. Do it again, should be a post request. Then you can see we were actually logged out, and if we try and get the notes, you can see though they weren't provided. And if I log in, then we can get them. Okay, so that's log out, and then the next thing we want to do is create an is authenticated. So we want to check if the user is authenticated when we go to a new page. So if they're not, then they won't be able to access this page. If they are, they can access the page. So if you go back to your views, we're going to create another function. So do it here. Do API view is authenticated request. Basically what we want to do is set some permissions here. Is authenticated. Okay, basically if they are authenticated, then this function will just work. It will give a response of 200. If it's not, it's going to throw an error, so we'll just return a response of authenticated is true. Okay, now if we create a root for this, so we call is authenticated, and then we can create a path for this, so we'll do authenticated is authenticated to, there you go. Then we can call this in Postman again to create a new request, and then we'll do authenticated, and if I log in, that should return again post. There you go, authenticate is true. If I log out, see authenticated, well, it didn't work. You can see I get an unauthorized, as they're not authorized anymore. Okay, that's almost it for all the APIs. The one last thing we need to do is create a registration API. So before we do that, is that we need to create a serializer for it. So we head over to our serializers, gonna create a user registration serializer. It's going to take in serializers.model serializer, and then what we want to do is we want to create a meta class. It's going to take in the user model, then the fields it's going to take in when we pass over the details. It's going to be username. It's also going to take in an email, and then we'll also take in a password. Okay. Before that, we want to make sure that the password is only write only, so no one can read the password, as that wouldn't be secure. So make it write only, which is true. And then if we want to create a user, it's going to pass in some validate data. So this is the data we're passing through from our front end, or whatever the data we're passing through, even if it's through Postman. And then the user we're going to create, so it's a user object with a username, which is equal to validated data username. And then they're also going to have an email, which is passed through validated data email. Then outside of that, we can set the user password through this function here, which is just going to be validated data password. And we can finally actually save them to the database, doing user.save, and then return our user. Okay, so with that done, we can actually just call this from a view, which we'll create. We'll just create one called register. So it'll be API view, be a post request, and let's go do this register request. And then what we want to do is grab our serializer, so we'll import it up here. Use the registration serializer. Just going to pass in our data. It's going to be the request.user. There. And then not request.user, request.data. So what's passed in from the body of the front end or the postman or whatever. So if the serializer is valid, we're going to save it, and we'll return the serializer data. Okay. Else we'll just return an error. So that's the last function we need to create for all our APIs. We can go over to our urls.py file, create a new path called register. If we call this register, and then we can have over back to Postman, create a final request for register, and then we need to give it a body. So we'll give it a username, we'll do Matt username, Matt makes code, have an email of matt@email.com, and then a password of 123, and then don't know why that didn't work. Oh, I know. So what we need to do is we need to give the permissions. By default, it should be authenticated. So we don't allow any. As you don't need to be authenticated to call this API. And it's a post request. And there you go. So it returns the data, and our user has been created. So if I log in, this was if I do username and then the password to be 123, you can see we successfully logged in. So that's pretty much it for all the APIs. We've set the cookies, and now all we need to do is actually call this from our front end. And yeah, that's actually done for all our APIs. It's been quite a long video, this one, but stick around for the next video if you're going to build the front end, and you'll have a really good project for your CV or GitHub. If this video helped you anyway, could you please like the video and subscribe to the channel? It will help me a ton, and thank you very much. Ta.